Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host Adil Raja, and I welcome you to this program, Geopolitics East and West, after a gap of around 2 weeks because we were busy elsewhere. And my co host, Tia Mullis, is with me, and today we will be discussing three very important issues. First is May 9th issue. Now, the Pakistani and the subcontinent audience may think that May 9th is only a relevant day where a false flag was staged in Pakistan to ban the most popular party of Pakistan. But May 9th is also a day which is celebrated by Russia for the capitulation of the Nazi army by the Red Army, and it is supposed to be a mega grand event. But this time around, the event was, it was a bit lackluster, and there's a lot of controversy going around and about it. So we will discuss that. And secondly, the Pakistani role as peacemaker is being challenged, and they are being termed as troublemakers because the CBS story which came out blamed the Pakistanis that they were sheltering the Iranian war aircraft at their at the Pakistani air bases, and they are not denying that as well. That's the strange thing, and we know Pakistanis have been playing, the Pakistani military establishment have all been playing both sides, but are Pakistanis the peacemakers or the troublemakers? That is an important question. And then finally, we will discuss the local elections results in which Labour got a lifetime shock, and Reform is, being tried to be portrayed as a party which will take over the next government. Maybe we hope not, but let's take them one by one, and let's welcome Theo, and let's go to Theo as a war correspondent. He covers Eastern Europe, in particular Ukraine to be specific. He's an expert in the Russian war. He follows the Russian politics. So Theo, this is very interesting that the Council of Foreign Relations, the Council of Foreign Relations gave this headline that Moscow's latest Victory Day parade reveals cracks in Putin's Russia. What are these cracks they're talking about here?
Well, I'm going to open with what May 9th is to Putin's Russia, right? Every nation, every society needs a narrative. They need a story, right, upon which their founding ethos is based. So, in the United States, for example, you've got 1776. You've got the rebels against Mad King George. In France, you have liberté, égalité, fraternité, etc. Every society has their ethos. India has Gandhi. Russia has victory over the Nazis in World War II, and this is Putin's Russia. So May 9th, the day we celebrate Victory in Europe Day on May 8th, but they celebrated a day later. It is the day. It is Christmas, New Year's, etc., all sort of rolled into one for Putin's Russia. And every year there is an enormous military parade in Red Square. And in previous years, before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, you'd see dozens of tanks, armored vehicles, jeeps, battalions of soldiers, helicopters, fighter jets, strategic bombers, the whole gamut of perceived Russian military might. Because it is essential in this narrative that Russia is perceived to be strong. Strength is very important to Putin's idea of Russia, of Russian greatness, and the glory of the Ruski Mir, the Russian world. So the cracks are being seen by many sort of outside commentators and those within, when this parade has, since the full-scale invasion, gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Last year, there was one tank, a single T-34 relic tank from World War II. And this year, absolutely no military equipment whatsoever, a very toned-down parade lasting only about 45 minutes. And one of the greatest embarrassments about this is that Ukrainian deep warfare drone strikes, the ones that travel thousands of miles into Russia that do hit areas around Moscow, have gotten so effective and so frequent that Vladimir Putin felt he had to speak to Donald Trump, the US president, to get him to ask President Zelensky not to carry out the drone strikes on those days. And President Zelensky said, well, it's just a celebration. How about we have a ceasefire to save human lives earlier in, I think it was May 5th, 6th, and 7th. And Putin said no. And eventually Zelensky, in a bit of a joke, released an official Ukrainian presidential decree authorizing the Russian government to hold a military parade in the Red Square on May 9th between these exact geolocated coordinates, which really is, I mean, yeah, a bit of a stick in the eye. And some of the language that Putin has recently been using as well. Bear in mind, his speeches at the start of the war in February 22, he's calling Zelensky a drug addict and a Nazi. And now it's Mr. Zelensky, I know, wants negotiations to take place in person. A bit of a change in language there. But I do have to put a bit of a dampener on all of this. There's a lot of work going out at the moment, which is saying that Russia there's a coup fermenting, right? The name Shoigu has been one of Putin's real top guys, has been thrown about. There was a French report from allegedly from French intelligence saying that security has been heightened, but when you actually read the report, it's really basic things like people are searched twice before meeting the president, which, I mean, I think that seems fairly normal. And I had an interview, which I'm going to shamelessly plug now, with the absolutely excellent Russia expert, Professor Mark Galliotti, about this, which you can find on my channel, where I ask, is a coup likely? Is it coming? And he seems to think it's unlikely at the moment. There is no clear successor for Putin, because Putin has rather effectively gotten rid of them all or subsumed them into the ecosystem of Putinism, where they rely on Putin to survive against their rivals, etc. So yes, this victory day, an absolute damp squib for Russia. And it is embarrassing for a nation that relies on strength and being seen to be strong as a core element of their national story. But does it mean that the cracks are really increasing and that we're going to see Russia fall apart anytime soon? Obviously, I don't know, and I don't think anybody does. And if they do, if they say they do, then
once you say Russia falls apart, you mean the Putin regime falling apart?
Yeah. I mean, bear in mind, Russia is a contiguous land empire made up of a number of colonies. But are we going to see a fall of the Putin regime? Perhaps is better phrased. I would say it's unlikely in the near future. Of course, I could be wrong, and I've certainly been wrong before. But anybody who's saying it's going to fall soon, I would be skeptical. Take that with, as we say, a grain of salt.
Well, to those who are saying it's going to fall soon, well, they have got hope in the quantum physics. They say that it's the power of manifestation. So they're trying to, do exactly that.
Oh, I'm right there with them trying to manifest it. But one has to be realistic about these things. And it is often said that these regimes seem completely impenetrable and permanent until they're not, and they fall apart. People in the 80s were saying the Soviet Union would last 1,000 years.
Yeah, you're right. But same story is happening in Pakistan, where the Pakistani military establishment under the Trump's favorite field marshal is, ruling the country with an iron fist. But there is a hybrid system there. So the military is very unpopular in Pakistan. So they need the support of these corrupt politicians. Most of them are corrupt because and the public mandate has been stolen. The Commonwealth report has noted it. European Union is still reluctant to release the report of the election observation mission of Pakistan of 2024 because Pakistanis are providing ammunition to Ukraine war and to the Ukrainian theater. So that is
one day
why
the EU will grow a spine. One day, I desperately hope and pray.
Yeah, we hope they release it in time. But Coming over to Pakistan, the Pakistan is also in the international news, and the latest allegation came from the CBS story, which has been covered by now almost all the media outlets, especially military.com, which and the allegations are that Pakistani sheltered Iranian warplanes during recent US-Iran crisis, and Washington wants answers from Pakistan's reported double role in the Iran crisis, exposed a risky regional balancing act. Yeah, so Pakistan has always been
Yeah.
playing a balancing act. That's true. That's there. But do you believe Pakistan to be a peacemaker? And once I say Pakistan, it is not Pakistan. It is the Pakistani military regime, the usurpers who are actually, holding power in Pakistan by manipulating the elections, which have already been proven through these various reports we've just talked about. So, do you believe the Pakistani military establishment, let's be specific, or the Pakistani hybrid regime, do you believe they're peacemakers or are they troublemakers?
I think that's an interesting dichotomy, and I don't think it quite fits. I think they will do whatever is to their advantage. If it is attempt to make peace between the United States and Iran, then they will do that if they can get something out of it. If, however, it is make trouble, fund some more terrorist organizations, see some things blown up in the large neighboring country, etc., then they will do that. I think that these guys, they are out for themselves. They're out for a large house in Chelsea. They are out for a large house in Islamabad, and they are out for ensuring that them and their family and their extended family will have the best jobs and will have money flowing. To some of them, to the worst of them, power is addictive, right? Power for power's sake. Do I think that they've maybe made a bit of a mistake? Again, I think that very much depends on the outcomes here. I can see the Iranians saying, we will come to the table, given that it was the Americans' approach to the Pakistanis to try to get some negotiations happening. And I can imagine the Iranians saying, okay, we'll come to the table. However, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And perhaps Z in that equation was look after some of our aging American warplanes and ensure that the Americans don't blow them up. Perhaps that was one of the conditions. And if a lasting peace is achieved and the Straits of Hormuz opens, well, then the Pakistanis are going to be, or the Pakistani regime is going to be seen as intelligent, as stable, as adults in the room, especially when you compare it to the insanity of Donald Trump and the insanity of the Iranian theocracy. So
that's right.
They will play the chameleons, right?
Yeah, that's true.
They're chameleons. They will change the color of like a chameleon does. If it's against a green bush, then it'll turn green. If it's against the bark of a tree, it'll turn brown. They're doing the same thing.
That's true. You're right. So the thing with Pakistan is, which I believe, is that they're trying to gain legitimacy for an illegitimate regime, which has been formed after manipulating the elections, after stealing the public mandate. And the public are not supporting them. So obviously, what they are doing is that they're desperate to find legitimacy from the U.S. and President Trump's personal interest over here, I believe, are superseding the U.S. national interest because President Trump's personal family is involved in businesses with the Pakistani regime. His best friend Steve Witkoff signed a deal of the Roosevelt Hotel, which is a Pakistani state-owned hotel in New York. And then there's this crypto deal going on in which Steve Witkoff's son came to Pakistan and signed a deal with the military chief and with the hybrid regime. So obviously President Trump's personal stakes are in the game, but the question is, for how long would that work for the Pakistanis? That's $1 million question. And just like Putin's regime, the Pakistanis believe that the Munir regime in Pakistan should also fall. And unlike Putin, Munir have got a lot of balls he's juggling at the same time. 6 or 7 different balls are in the air all the time for him. So it's only a matter of one of those balls dropping, and that'll be the end of his regime. That's what we hope, and that's what we believe.
dictators are always playing that game, right? And that's the great curse of becoming one of these people, is that I don't know if you've ever heard. I studied classics at school, so the Sword of Damocles, right?
Mm.
So Greek story, the slave says to the king, why should I not be king? Why do you get to sit on the throne and have all the power and have all the wealth? And the king says, okay, you can sit on the throne for a day. And he sits him down and he takes a sword and he ties it on a very thin piece of string and sits it over the throne.
Mm.
And that is the life which these people choose for themselves. So Vladimir Putin, he's never going to retire and write his memoirs in his converted garden office, like a politician from many other parts of the world would. No, he's going to fall out of a window, have a heart attack or a stroke, or get a bullet to the back of the head. And same with Mr. Munir.
Well, let's see. We are hoping that there is a clause in the article, which happens, but usually the dictators, they end a very nasty end. But moving forward to this, I won't say that Reform Party represents dictatorship in the UK, but they do represent the far right, and far right is always finds the fault in the system. They try to blame it on somebody else, and I believe that's what's happening. But the local elections, which have just concluded in the UK, we have seen that the Labour Party did get a real shocker there. And Reform is being portrayed as the up and coming party. There are counter arguments to that. But having said that, it's quite clear that the two-party system is over in the UK. And so the question arises that will Reform be able to form government in the next elections in the UK, and I believe in 2029, and would they be June 2029? And would Nigel Farage become the Prime Minister of the UK? And in that case, he's very clear what he's going to do. There will be certain extremist changes in the UK, like pulling UK out from the European Charters of Human Rights. So do you believe that Reform would eventually be successful in making a government in the UK and implementing their agenda? Because a lot of prominent people are joining the party, and there are a lot of secret donors which are coming forward who are supporting Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. What are your views about it here?
So Reform represents the continuation of the populist wave that we've seen really since the mid 2010s across the democracies. We saw Trump get elected, we saw Brexit, the rise of the AfD, the rise of Front National, AfD in Germany, Front National in France, and it is at its core populist politics of anger and, to an extent, of protest. So people are voting Reform generally because they believe, and in many cases rightly in the United Kingdom, that their lives are not being addressed, their issues are not being addressed by the politicians that have been elected. That's not always correct, but it's very attractive when in the last 14, 15 years, you feel this way, and then a politician says, I will fix everything for you. And he's, Nigel Farage, you've got to hand it to him. He is the best politician in the UK in terms of just being a politician, in terms of selling his message, in terms of being as unscrupulous as you need to be, and in terms of being very charismatic, despite the fact he is a very short man. He is charismatic. He is able to get that across, and he is able to ensure that people don't ask the question, the essential question you should ask of anybody when they say, I can fix this, all of these enormous problems for you, is how. When asked how, just like on the very opposite end of the spectrum, Zach Polanski in the Green Party, and this applies really across the world to populists, you should always be asking, how are you going to do it? Okay, so you're going to ensure Britain experiences enormous economic growth. How? You're going to cut poverty. How? But the thing that Nigel represents, which perhaps Mr. Polanski doesn't, is he does to a certain extent actually, is the blaming of a group. And for Farage, that's immigrants. And that's quite dangerous, because that way you get ICE in the United States, who have done horrific things. Many people have died. At least 2 US citizens were unarmed. Well, actually, one was armed, but his gun was pulled out of his back pocket. He was legally armed. Were shot by ICE agents who were protesting. And the violence and the rage has increased in the United States to such a point it's gotten quite dangerous. And he said, when asked questions over here along those lines, he said, "Oh, well, let them riot." And then he's also said, "Oh, the immigration detention centers, we are going to only put those in constituencies which don't vote for reform." That's dangerous talk. That's scary talk. And the United Kingdom and many countries do have to address immigration. It has moved from a rightist issue to a centrist issue. And it is something which needs to have a real national debate that is clear-headed. Reform do not offer that. They only offer anger. They only offer the blaming of an other for all of the problems that, frankly, Nigel Farage and those very much like him, and those in his party, considering they all seem to be ex-Tories who ran the country for 14 years before Starmer got in, the problems they caused. So it's a real bait and switch. It's a, hey, look at this guy over here. He's big and scary, and he's an immigrant, and he doesn't think like you. And I'm going to be taking those public services away while you're not looking.
So,
that's
final verdict. Yeah, final verdict. Will reform rule the UK?
Shall we answer at the same time?
All right, go. 1, 2, 3. No. Yeah. No. That's true. So one other thing, I believe the answer is unanimous again. Is Farage UK's Trump?
He'd like to be.
Yeah,
he'd very much like to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, his problem his problem, I believe, is that the British people are not as naive as the Americans are. That's putting it mildly. Yes.
There's also a number of years until the next election. And Keir Starmer, although he does have the charisma of a dead fish, has actually done some fairly reasonable things. Growth is up and unemployment is down. We're investing in areas that we need to. I say this as not a Labour supporter, but he's not this reincarnation of Chairman Mao crossed with Stalin that much of the right-wing press seem to think he is.
Yeah, a lot of my sorry to cut you short. A lot of my community are the NHS doctors, and they tell me that the NHS is performing much better. And I'm also not a Labour supporter, by the way, but they tell me the NHS under the current government is performing much better. Well, that's a heartbreaking thing, isn't it? Because reform, I believe, wishes to do away with the NHS the way it stands and bring in the insurance companies in. So I'm unable to fathom how would anyone support that.
Because they're not told about that element of it. Again, it's the bait and switch. It's the look at the scary immigrant, and there goes your NHS. And they're doing it to aggrandize themselves. Nigel Farage is, I mean, being a member of Parliament is pretty low down his list of sources of income, right? He's a grifter at the end of the day, and he's a very charismatic, effective grifter. But it needs to be recognized what he is. So and I'll say this to all of the audience, whenever you get a politician knocking on your door, or he's speaking at a campaign rally saying, "I will fix everything," always think, how are you going to do that? And if you don't get an answer, or if they try to dodge the question, well, then they're full of I don't want to get demonetized.
Yeah, I got that. Anyway, thank you to for this very candid discussion as always, and it was quite straightforward. We've covered the three very important topics, ladies and gentlemen. We've talked about the 9th May Russian parade and what's actually going on in Russia and Ukraine. We would like to, talk about a bit further about the Ukrainian domestic politics, in which Tucker Carlson's secretary came in, and gave an interview. Zelensky, President Zelensky's secretary goes to the Tucker Carlson show, and
his former press secretary, Yulia Mendel, yes,
interview there, and it's obviously, as we were discussing earlier, part of the domestic politics in Ukraine. But please.
And Zelensky's former chief of staff, Yermak, in the sights of a significant corruption investigation, which is pretty significant. Pre-Nabu Sapo, pre-Maidan, could never have happened.
Yeah, so possibly we'll discuss this in the future episodes, and hopefully we'll be doing these episodes regularly again, because I've been receiving your messages that you're missing the shows. So we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Subscribe to both the channels, and see you soon. Thank you to you.
Thank you.